Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarai.
Amen.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning, Chevra, Guten, Rosh Chodesh, Adar, B'siyata D'Shmaya. It's such a privilege to jump back into our learning of Likutei Moharan. Apologies for the little bit of a late start. We had some technical difficulties, but now we're ready. And we jump back in with Hashem's help to Torah Mem Zayin, which we began yesterday. Let's just do the dedications quickly. This class is sponsored by Yitzchak Gedaliah ben Ilanit for the Schus of Menashe Gabriel ben Chava and Avram Shlomo ben Ilanit, and by Zev Klein, nishmas, his parents, Rivka Brent Street, Simcha and Ya'akov ben Yeshעיהו, also for shidduchim, for Yehudis, Adina bas Elisheva, Rochel, Dovid ben Fayga, Kayla, Yonatan, Shimon ben Hadassah, Ronit, Netanel ben Meechal, Mahnaz, Dovid ben Ya'el, and Noach Avram ben Sarah Rochel, as well as Zev ben Rivka Bryndel and all of Klal Yisrael. Also dedicated as a schus for Refuah Shleima for Chaim Yehoshua ben Chaya Miriam. As Hashem, we should only hear B'suras Teves on account of the learning that we are doing every day and this morning in particular. So we carry on with Torah Mem Zayin. Very quick review. We began this yesterday. We'll have to end a little bit early as a result of the earlier davening this morning for Rosh Chodesh, but we'll try to get as much as we can in with Hashem's help. So yesterday we were speaking about Taivas Achila and distance from MS, Dinim, as well as Busha and poverty, Dallas, and the Rebbe was weaving this incredible tapestry with very terse, dense weave, like a close-knit tapestry of many different sources that are connecting all these different concepts together and essentially telling us that if a person wants to have HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light shining into their lives in the aspect of Yisa Hashem Panav Elecha, the tikkun of emes, where their lives are transparent, so to speak, to a spiritual layer of reality that's shining down into our circumstances and our experience. This is the aspect of Yaakov Avinu. And this is connected to the concept of MS as Yaakov, the tikkun of MS in the Yud Gimel Midas of Rachamim. This is associated with financial stability, which we said either actually means wealth or a mindset of the Tam, Ezu Asher Asameach B'chalkai, because Kushta, Kai, these two things are connected, and Kai is a reference to the feet, and that's a reference to financial stability. And then all of this is connected to the light of Tefillin, as well as the light of Eretz Yisrael, which we spoke about, which is a land Asher Loi B'Miskenos Taicha B'Alechem, where a person doesn't eat bread out of poverty, but out of Tikkun Taivas Achila. It's an eretz where Eicheles Yoshveha, where the eating is filled with the light of Yoshveha, which is a reference to Yaakov Avinu by Yeshiv Yaakov, the eretz Meguri Aviv. And it's a land of Tefillin. And that's what we learned yesterday, was the remez of Naftali Ayla Shlucha Hanoisein Imre Shafer. Right? We said Shefer is the bechina of glory, splendor, Tefillin Pe'er, right? The beauty of Tefillin. And then we said that Hanoisen Imre Shafer is itself Rosh Tevis Isha, which is Re'e Chaim Im Isha. Chaim was a reference to Tefillin, which we saw in two different sources. And then Naftali itself is the letters of Tefillin. And basically, again, with the Rebbe, sometimes you have to bring a lot of the different sources together, and then you sort of get a feel for what kind of energy he's describing, because it's more than any of the particular details that when they come together form a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And that's the case for what we're learning over here about this special light that is shining into one's life when we are careful about this particular Nakuda of Avodas Hashem. So let's jump in now to the second column. We're up to the paragraph Ukasha Anu, and then we'll let Reb Nassan take over, and I'll take us back to the beginning and restructure things in a way that is a little bit more intelligible. And the tzaddik begins, Ukasha Anu Eichlim Shefa Emes Habadarach Eretz Yisrael. When a person is engaged in working on Taivas Achila, eating less and more consciously, so then there's zoichet to the shefa emes that comes through Eretz Yisrael. They are already, even if they're in Chutz La'aretz, they're already connected to that energy of Eretz Yisrael. Yesterday we spoke about actually moving to Eretz Yisrael, but we've been learning over the past couple of Torahs, especially with regard to clapping our hands, right? Like we learned in Torah Mem Dalid, about how even in Chutz La'aretz, a person can stay connected to the Avir to Eretz Yisrael. We learned this in Lamed Ches or Lamed Tes as well with regard to giving tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael. There are many different ways that the Rebbe told us, even if a person is in Chutz La'aretz, you can be connected to Eretz Yisrael energy, right? Which we spoke about a number of times. And over here, the Rebbe says a person who's careful with this kind of eating, Yaakov Avinu eating, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz, eretz eicheles yeshveh. So then they're connected to what's called shefa emes haba derech Eretz Yisrael. It's coming down to the world through Eretz Yisrael. So v'yacher kach anu medaber mihiluloi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'zeh hakoyach, and then a person uses that clean, lean sustenance that they've accessed, maybe on a trip to Uman, for example, where the food is not so. But a person manages through connecting to eating that's more mitzumtzam to then praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to then sing to Hashem, and they're able to sing b'zeh hakoyach as anasa shemayim va'aretz chadasha. This creates a new heaven and a new earth. Like Chazal tell us in Akdama to the Zayar, Davhem and Alav Lemer, Tzion, Ami Ata, say to Klal Yisrael, to Tzion, to Am Yisrael who's living in Eretz Yisrael, Ami Ata, you are my nation, and say Chazal famously, Al Tikri Ami, don't read it, Ami, my nation, Ela Imi, with me, Bishutafi, in partnership with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We are a nation in partnership with the Creator of heaven and earth. Because the new heaven, which is the revelation of a new spiritual reality, is on account of Aras Pnei Yaakov, the illumination of the countenance of Yaakov Avinu. And because we're accessing the energy of Eretz Yisrael, Memela, we have Shemayim, which is Yaakov, which is always the sphere of Tiferes, right, which is representative of Shemayim, that's always associated with Tiferes, Yaakov Avinu, and then Eretz is Malchus, is Eretz Yisrael. Shahilechas HaShefa, Derech Eretz Yisrael. We're making a yichud between Yaakov, which is Tiferes, and Eretz Yisrael, which is Malchus, and that's Yichud Kutsha B'Richu Shchinte. Memela, when that happens, we become a shutuf with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in recreating all of reality by bringing megadoses of Shefa down into the world to recreate heaven, Yaakov Avinu, and to recreate earth, Eretz Yisrael. Nimtza Shebara Achshav Shamayim U'Mazalos Acherim. Right now is renewed, brand new Mazalos. That everything changes in all the spiritual, metaphysical realms. Nimtza. It emerges Shemeshana Teva, that this person is able to change nature. Because Teva is rooted in the functionality of the Mazalis. But when the Mazalis change, Ein Mazal Yisrael, when Klal Yisrael is lifted above the Mazalis, like Avraham Avinu was told, say Nignus, or whatever the lashon over there is, Shelcha, right? To be able, Hashem lifted him outside by Yetzes Achutza. Hashem lifted Avraham outside of the Mazalis, where Avraham Avinu was not to have children, right? And then he was lifted above. And in that place, Teva can change. Right? So that goes back to the beginning where the Rebbe said that a person who's careful about their eating in this way can do moifsim, because they have an achiza in the mazales. They're able to break their own Teva, like we spoke yesterday in this year. They're able to overcome their own nature. Memela, all of reality is able to reformulate itself in alignment with that person's ratzon and with that person's personality and their consciousness. So here Reb Nosson says, Gam Zaisa Torah kasavti mitchila ba'atzmi. This Torah, as well as the previous Torah, says Reb Nosson, I wrote down first by myself, and I found that it's a little bit clearer than the way that the Rebbe had written for his notes, his own personal use before giving the shir. Gam siyim pirish amikra va'achaltem nechser kam l'shenei HaKodesh. Also, the explanation of the pasuk with which the Rebbe began from Yoel, va'achaltem acha v'savei v'hilaltem v'chulei, is not there in the Rebbe's own writing, but he did get to it when he gave over the Torah. What one is reveals, the other one hides. What one hides, the other one reveals. Therefore, I also included a copy of my rendering, which I wrote on my own. And here we go really back to the beginning, and he restructures things in such a way that makes it just a bit clearer. So says Reb Nosson, You shall eat your food and you shall become sated. And you shall praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the rest of the pasuk, which we'll get to at the end. A person who emerges from the Taivas Achila, a person who works on this and is able to overcome, he can become a person who is able to do mofsim, a person for whom nature is not as sturdy and cemented as it is for others. But a person who's stuck in Tavas Achila, simin shehu shakran. A person has to be choshesh that this person is not yet connected to the truth deeply enough that they're living a life of authenticity. V'chein afilu ish tzaddik, and therefore even an ish tzaddik, and again, Rav Nosson is, when he adds details here that we didn't learn, isn't because he's making them up. When Rabbi Nachman gave over the Torah, he gave over this, right? So there are some details that we're going to find here that the Rebbe didn't write, but they are absolutely from Rabbi Nachman. Even a very righteous person, that generally has already emerged from this taiva, and then falls into this taiva again, it's a siman that he must have said something untrue. There's a connection between these two things. The way that we're learning about it, the R of Shviras Tavas Achila is the R of Emes. Memela, each one is going to have an adverse reaction, an adverse effect on the other. Right? So it's not only that if a person really works on Tavas Achila, then they're going to have the light of Emes. Sometimes it can be the flip. The more that a person is really careful, midva sheker tirchak, that can boost, right, is a taiva for Taivas Achila, which works out very beautifully, because if you remember, we learned in Torah Lamed Tes, when we learned that little Torah of an Asati Esa B'Sal Chalavem Techa, where also we spoke about Taivas Achila. Over there, the way that we spoke about it is in the context of running away. We talked about it as an escape. We talked about it as a person, right? And this was also connected to the Busha of Torah Lamed Ches. I have to go back and review, but that's what we learned over there, that a person who feels this sense, this deep existential sense of shame, wants to run away and drown their problems in drink, right, or food, or millions of other escapes, right? But if you hear the Rebbe saying, if a person overcomes that tendency to be in a state of shame, where they're able to open up, we spoke about in Torah Lamed Ches, where they're able to reveal their authenticity, and they're able to show up, right? We spoke about the idea of Roish Tvarcha Emes, right? The ability to really speak vulnerably with authenticity, to name the problem and not to walk around it by saying, right, right? But just to say behema tmeya, to be able to name what a person's going through openly, so then a person is less likely to feel the need to escape and to run away. And so that's part of what we're speaking about over here. It's a very similar construct. Simin sheyatza sheker mipiv. Sheker can compel a person into these experiences. So sometimes we have it all backwards. It isn't that there's a taiva that we need to overcome and then we'll fix up what's going on inside. Sometimes the taiva, oftentimes, is only the symptom of something much deeper. Right? And that's what the Rebbe is saying over here. Simin shuhu shakran. Right? It's not that a person becomes an untruthful person because they're so hedonistic. It's that their only desire in the first place is as a result of something much deeper going on, which is that they are in a state of sheker because they're not ready to live with transparency, openness, vulnerability, authenticity to the nth degree. If they would do that, then that's a way, even though it seems completely indirect, of getting to the core of the malady, which Meechal will take care of the symptom.
It's extremely deep. It's like, not that I've ever been to therapy, but I imagine therapy is when they try to find the source of causes. Is that what's going on over here?
That's part of it, yes.
It's not on face value, but someone's eating because they want to eat something. They're eating because of X, Y, and Z. And that's right. That's right.
I would imagine that the Rebbe is preempting a lot of modern psychology, which we spoke about many times in the previous year, how these two things have coalesced, right? The revelation of Pnimis HaTorah, to the one hand, which is looking beyond the surface, and a lot of modern psychology, which takes it as a given, right? That what we see on the surface is not really it, right? That we have to go deeper. We have to find out what are the roots, what are the core issues that are manifesting as these behavioral problems, right?
That's extremely hard-hitting.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's what the Rebbe is doing. Right? The
only other time I remember mentioning something of that sort of extreme was by Shmiras Sabris, he mentioned also something which was
very similar.
I don't remember what it was, but I remember it was like, if you not careful with Shmiras Sabris, then it's also your.
That's right. It's a very similar thing, right? It's an indicator as to something much deeper that's going on. Okay, right? And that shows also that there's din on this person. But again, translated into more modern terminology, it means that this person's living in tzimtzum. This person's living in a constricted, sort of a what they'd call the judging mind, right? The mind of Eitz Hadas Toivera, right? Constantly being stuck without the freedom of living with the tmimas, right? Of the emes, the tefillin, the R that we're speaking about previously in the Torah, being stuck in one's own self-consciousness as opposed to just being matzah-like, transparent, open, and full of R. The gam is siman anias, and it is also a siman for anias. Again, many of the themes that we already spoke about. But here the Rebbe unravels and unfolds it through the lens of Reb Nassan's Chus Yagunalin of Inyan. And he says, so, okay, where are we getting all this from? The pasuk says in Devarim, you should eat, you should be satisfied, and you shall bless. The L'chaira says Reb Nassan, mizet tava tainas hayitzahara lechav l'zbaylam alas nafshay v'achakach levaris Hashem. Right, L'chaira, on the surface, you can look at this pasuk and say, okay, listen, it's a pasuk. V'yachalta v'savata. The Yitzhar can say, just eat until you're gonna burst, right? That's v'yachalta v'savata. You shall be totally sated and satisfied. Oh, and then levarach es Hashem. But Chazal comment on this and Ksiva shalai yisapanim uksiv yisa Hashem panav elecha. There's a steer between these two psukim, which on the one hand Hashem says la yisapanim, and then on the other hand it says yisa Hashem panav elecha. So which one is it? And Chazal say and paraphrase HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give Yachol saying, how can I not turn my face to this people? So again, on the remez level, this is reference to eating even just a little bit. Not that we make brachas even when we're just eating a little bit, which is pshat, but on a remez level, it's referring to tikkun tavas achila. Says Rav Nassim, it's a remez nifla. This is an awesome remez that a misra medaktikim, and here's what he says very clearly. It's not so deep. It's just livli lechal harbe. That's really what it is. It's not such a deep tikkun. Previously, when we spoke about tavas achila, we were speaking about our consciousness, right? Achila bekasher is not just that the food should be kosher, that the eating should be kosher with mindfulness, v'chule. Here the Rebbe just says, very simple, livli lechal harbe. That's it. Just not to eat a lot. Person sits down to eat, smaller portions. That's tikkun tavas achila, period. And again, for each person will be relative to their regular, normal stuff, right? To make it a little bit less, to leave over a little. I never liked that idea of leaving over a little bit because, where does the rest of the food go? It just goes to the rubbish, to the trash, to the garbage. Just take a little, right? Or take not so much. That's called tikkun tavas achila. Live li, these three words. Live li le'echol harbe rak mikazayis v'at kebeya. Little bit, which is referred to, apparently, according to the tzaddikim in this Gemara, as mikazayis v'at kebeya. Small portions. Azai heim bebechinas. When Klal Yisrael, when each individual does this, then yisa Hashem panav va'az yesh nesias panim, and then their life is going to be able to be more spiritual. We see this b'chush, right? A person who finishes a heavy meal, they feel tired, they want to go to sleep, they feel very lethargic. It's the gashmius, right, element, the yisaida afar, which is afar min adama, that's dragging a person down, right? Somebody's pointed out, and I think I've mentioned this in the past, that you can always see this just b'chush by the difference between the way that a person makes a bracha rishayna and the way that a person oftentimes makes a bracha achrayna. The bracha rishayna is full of, like they say, eating with gusto. A person makes a bracha with gusto. With tremendous excitement and passion and kavanah. By the time you get at the end of the meal to birchas hamazon, it's like, first just like muttering the words. Why? Because something happened over the course of the eating. Eating is a very physical activity, right? Eating, like the Nefesh HaChaim tells us in Shar Beis, has the tchuna to bind the gashmius with the ruchnius. That if a person doesn't eat for a significant amount of time, chas v'shalom, what happens? they become very weak. Rabbi Nachman is going to say later on in Likutei Moharan, weakness is as a result of the neshama beginning to be nisparid from the guf. Right? That eating gives us more strength means that we're taking the neshama and we're dragging it down further into the body. So on the one hand, Hashem wants the neshama to be in the guf. And so if a person eats properly, that process occurs in a beautiful way, right? In a way where the neshama maintains its consciousness that the only reason it came down into this world into a guf, in so many of the previous tires that we've been learning, Chachma and Bina, right? The opportunity to be broken into our own sense of self only for the purpose, like Chava split off from Adam, to then turn around and to meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol Panim B'Panim. That's a very beautiful thing. That's called Bina or Shirish HaGvuras, right? Where we're mamtik the din at the Shirish to say, yes, I have a sense of self. Yes, I have a body, and the neshama that's in the body is meant to be there, but it's there for a particular reason. It's not supposed to get stuck in the nefesh and dragged down. However, if a person isn't eating properly, then that process of binding the neshama to the guf is very bad for the neshama, right? And dims the light of the neshama. And the middle of this person is not living in the spotlight of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is called the Yesh Nesiyas Panim. Says that Reb Nassan Achal Hepech, because if you have the flip side, Chas v'Shalom, Miklal Hein Atashmi Allah, right? From what we learn on the positive side, you can infer from the negative, from the contrast. When a person is stuck in this drive to eat and eat and eat and eat, which is the aspect, like we're learning, of a symptom of a core issue of sheker, that a person really needs to be mevarer within themselves. Are they finally willing to show up authentically, right? And really be willing to let other people in, to see their vulnerability without trying to pretend and to protect and to strategize. Then a person is living in an experience of hastaras panim, because the neshama is the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within us. L'cha amar libi bakshu panai, as Rashi tells us over there. L'cha amar libi, the leiv is the neshama. Bishlichuscha, the neshama is on shlichus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The leiv is on shlichus. And so when we are shutting out the light of our neshama on account of the hiskabrus hataiva of the guf, so then memela we're cut off from the Yisa Hashem Panav, and we're cut off from the revelation of Hashem's presence in our lives. However, when a person goes ahead and magnifies the neshama and minimizes the guf, again, each person on their own madrega, masa katan, right? Even the smallest little act in our time is considered, right, such an incredible thing, shakal, right? Like that song, and the words from that Arizal, which came before it, right? Or Chaim Yehoshua. So then a person is able to progress, right? It doesn't have to be drastic or dramatic like everything we learn. It just means just a little, whatever little bit we can put this into practice. V'hine, says the Rebbe, Nesiyas Panim u'bechinas emes. That Nesiyas Panim is an aspect of emes because it's the truth. It's the truth for why we were sent down into this world. It's the truth of the neshama guf compound that isn't something that's shameful. It just is. Yeah, I have a body. And I struggle like any human being because I'm not meant to be an angel, and that's okay. And when a person sort of maintains that consciousness, and this goes along with a whole different range of thoughts and emotions around struggle, where a person doesn't fall into the shame of catastrophizing to say, oh my gosh, I slipped, it's all over because I was meant to be perfect. All these are very unhealthy ways of thinking. Where do they come from? A person will go to therapy. I happen to know a very good therapist who happens to be in this room. Maybe some people should go to therapy, I don't know. But it says, everybody. So what's the nakuda? The nakuda is that when we trace things back, we realize where these things came from. Oh, in childhood, I got the feeling from my parents, let's say, right, that a person was meant to be perfect, right? And if a person gets that feeling, and then they grow up in that way, and they're constantly criticized, and they constantly are not allowed to express their authentic feelings about their brokenness, and everything needs to be very tidy and neat, then they grow up with this concept, which is totally wrong, that a person's supposed to be perfect. Anytime that they slip, it's the end of the world, right? And then they have to develop strategies to protect their image so that to other people they look perfect. And then where it comes, because it's got to come out somewhere, they're running to escape into all these different areas, right? That's one model of many, right? But that's something that can happen. So the Rebbe over here writes that when a person is living in the Siyas Panim, Hu b'chinas emes. So then they're just authentic. They're just living in a space of okayness. Yes, sometimes we fall. Seder, you wipe yourself back up, you dust yourself off, and you get back up, and you carry on the journey without this catastrophizing, without this bilam consciousness of, like we learned in previous tires, right, of hopelessness. This healthy perspective that the Rebbe is really trying to give us in Likutei Moharan. Like it's written in the Kavanas Arizal on the 13 meters, tikkun emes, the tikkun of the word, the emes, in the 13 meters of Rachamim, who ha'aras panim, means ha'aras panim, the illumination of Hashem's face, of Hashem's light in our lives. And this is what we wrote, that a person who's stuck in achila means hurachak me emes. We're trying to escape from something. And a person needs to be mizbainin on that and check in with the way that they're thinking and attempt either through therapy, right, which is highly recommended, or through many other ways for a person to cleanse their heart. To cleanse their heart. Mendy, again, not to pick on you too much. A little bit, not too much. But when you said before, I said, not that I'm in therapy. I'm in therapy. I'm actually in therapy. Right, and there's no shame in being in I think there's not only isn't there shame in being in therapy. I think if a person can, I really think everybody should have the privilege of being able to sit once a week, however long, once every 2 weeks. Once. This is not just a plug for Yossi, but that who is an excellent therapist, but was my therapist, but I've heard. But that a person should sit and be able really to have the privilege of really going into oneself and really being, maybe this used to be, again, in previous diaries, I think I mentioned this also, when communities were much closer knit and people were generally more authentic. This is what a good friend was, maybe. And you sat with someone who was really able to be open with you, or maybe this is what cheshbon hanefesh was, where a person really was able to sit and take a look at different mannerisms. If we don't do this, right, with the help of someone else, it's not likely to happen, on its own. So I really highly recommend. I think every person could benefit from it. And this whole conversation about like Torah and psychology, which is a huge debate and conversation, especially today where Pnimius HaTorah is so oftentimes, like we're learning here, seems to overlap. It's not necessarily a stira. The Torah gives us the right ways to think. But b'yadata hayoim v'ashivoisa elavavecha, right? In order for it to work, derech eretz, like I've said so many times, kadmul l'Torah, meaning a person has to have a healthy foundation within which the Torah is able to descend, take root, be planted, like the Vilna Gaon writes on that Ma'amar Chazal, derech eretz kadmul l'Torah. It has to be good, fertile earth. The heart has to be open. What therapy does is not Torah. Right, it's not that the Torah we get from here, right? Hopefully there's very unhealthy Torah also. We've learned that also in Torah Lamed Aleph. Even the Torah that tzaddik needs to be approached carefully. We've learned that a number of times. What therapy can do is it can open one's heart. So then, like the Kotzker, Vashivoisa, no, not Vashivoisa, Dvarim He'ela al levavchem, or al levavecha, right? So the Kotzker says, first you pile the Torah up. Then if you can manage to open the heart, then the Torah is able to come in. And that's what therapy can do. So it's it's something in this generation, more and more, people are realizing we need it. We need it. We need it. We need it so deeply, given everything that we've gone through in our own personal lives, collectively as a nation. What an opportunity to be able to sit and to work through our things, to work through our stuff. Could be very, very useful. Even if a person doesn't feel like they need it per se, I think it could be really helpful for everybody. I should say 2 therapists, right? Or therapists to be on your way. Therapists in training. Baruch Hashem. We're almost outnumbered over here. Oh my goodness. Maybe we need it that badly. Like, on this side of the room.
And Jeremy.
And Jeremy also a psychiatrist. Baruch Hashem. So it's a lechatchila. It's not chas v'shalom b'diavad. It's very, very, very precious and beautiful thing. Okay, so back inside.
That's what they often say, that, and often it seems to be a fact, and definitely from my experience, that although it's not Torah, but generally people become better Yidden, warmer Yidden through it.
For sure. And this is probably why. Also, aside from the fact that the Teichen is very Torah oriented, a lot of it, a lot of models. There's a synergy between the two. Again, there's a line. We believe that Torah is emes. It's not a human construct, but This is Hashem put Chachma into the world. Yes, exactly. It's an incredible thing that's happening. Okay, so back inside. V'hinenesius panim hu bechinas emes, right? This energy nesius panim is the light of emes. Kamavur b'kavanas al shloishes midas. Tikkun emes hu aras panim, right? That's what the R Yaakov is telling us. Zesh amarnu ki amashuk b'achilu rachik mi emes. Ki hu ba'astaras panim shu midas emes keniskel el. Because the more that a person is stuck in this form of escape, it means ki hu ba'astaras panim. It means that light of authenticity, which is Hashem's presence, which is just living with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? But in a healthy way, not that I have to be perfect in order to earn a just I'm saturated with the light of the divine already, right? And a person who lives with that, embodies that, feels that, whole life is different. They're okay. They live with Yeshiva Das. They're not constantly looking for the next. They live with Menuchas HaNefesh. That's the goal. That's called matzah. Going back to Torah, hey. Simple, pashut, the light of the tam, not chametz. Simple, don't need that much. Content, happy. That's what we want, right? In a word. Says the Rebbe, let's try to push forward, and then we get to go daven a little bit earlier today, and we'll continue tomorrow. V'hinei kol ha'olam kula niza mishefa shel Eretz Yisrael ki yadua. The Gemara in Taanis tells us that all the shefa of the world comes down through Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Yisrael v'atzmai mekabel shefa min emes, and Eretz Yisrael itself is mekabel shefa from emes. Again, shemidas Yaakov, because Malchus, Eretz Yisrael is Malchus, Eretz, right, is Malchus, and Yaakov is the midah of emes, and that's Tiferes. So Malchus, which is the Levana, is constantly reflecting the light of the Shemesh, and that's Yichud Kutcha B'Richu Shchintei. Kinemar, as the pasuk says, Titein Emes LiYaakov Hu Midas Tiferes Shu Klal Yisrael. And the midah Tiferes is associated with a proliferation of colors, like we learned yesterday. Abram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the three primary colors. V'hu B'chinas Shamayim, and this is the aspect of Shamayim, Eshu Mayim, which is Klal Yisrael, right? Esh and Mayim, red and blue. The two primary colors, Shugam Kin Klal Yisrael, and those are, again, the collectivity of the different sparkling lights and colors. V'zemrum is Torah, and that's what the Torah is telling us. Eretz Eicheles Yeshva. Eretz Yisrael, Al Pi Pshat, is a land that devours its inhabitants. Says Rav Nassan, and we're going to see the same thing in Torah Kuf Yud Tes, I believe, or Kuf Tes or Kuf Yud Tes. Similar idea. The kasha. It's very hard to understand. Hein emes shamaraglam etziu sheker mipiem. Interesting line. Hein emes shamaraglam etziu sheker mipiem. It is true that the Meraglim said something untrue. Ach ech nichtav sheker shalahem ba'Torah. How could their sheker be written in the Torah? The Torah is emes. So he says, yes, I get it. It's true that they said it, but what they said isn't true. So how could what they said be recorded? Just say that they said something untrue. How could the thing that's untrue that they said be recorded in the Torah shehi emes? Must be that these words themselves have a truth to them on a deeper level. So what's the truth? Says Rav Nassan, says Rabbi Nachman, this is the remez to what we mentioned earlier. Eretz Eicheles, Koloimar, meaning to say, Sha'achilasa, the eating of Eretz Yisrael, V'ashpa'asa, and the Hashpa of Eretz Yisrael, Hu Mimechinas Yoshveha, comes on account of Yoshveha, Shu Bechinas, Vayeshev Ya'akov. Shu Midas Emes Keniska La'el. Eretz Eicheles, you know where Eretz Yisrael is nizan from? Eretz Yisrael being the sphere of Malchus, being the Levana. You know where it gets its Shefa? Yoshveha, from the Bechina of Tiferes, from the Bechina of Yeshev Yaakov, and you could say Yoshveha is Yeshev Ka, right? Yeshev Ka is that settling of divinity down into our heart and mind. A person who's living with this healthy sense of self, which is rooted in the capital S self, which is the Chelik L'Kamimal. And this is also the Bechina Til. Let's just finish the paragraph. Shenekram Pe'er Shemidas Yaakov, and this is the midah of Yaakov Avinu, the aspect of Pe'er, which is the Hisparus of Tiferes, right? It's Pe'er. That's the midah of Yaakov. Al-Kain, Nikris Eretz Yisrael, Ayala Shlucha, Noisin Imrei Shafer. That's why Eretz Yisrael is described as Ayala Shlucha. The plants grow and blossom very quickly. Noisin Imrei Shafer, Kamay Shadarsh, Rabbi Sin Zechon Lebracha, Kalaimar Eretz Yisrael, Ayala Shlucha Lavashal Peresach, Chazal Darshin, that this pasuk is referring to Eretz Yisrael. It is a land where the fruits blossom and grow very quickly and beautifully. And its hashpa is from the midah of emes, which, like we said already, is a bechin of Tiferes, bechinas tefillin, which is the aspect of tefillin v'hainu hanoisin imrei shafer. Right? Naftali ayala shlucha Eretz Yisrael. Where does it get its shefa from? Hanoisin imrei shafer. Ki shefer hu lashon pe'er. Shefer is pe'er. Shebechinas tefillin. V'yesh l'rames naftali hu oisias tefillin. And you can say imrei is dibor and Malchus is peh. So imrei is itself a reference to Malchus. Hanoisin imrei. You know what it is that gives imrei? You know what it is that sends shefa down into Malchus? Shefer, which is the bechin of Pe'er, which is the bechin of Tiferes, which is the bechin of Ya'akov, which is Vayeshev Ya'akov, Memela Eretz, Oicheles, Yeshveha. Ezra Hashem will continue tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for joining.
I wasn't going to talking down therapy. I was saying I didn't want to quote therapy. Ani
haben ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני